Hey, happy Tuesday to you. Hope you're having yourself a great day. I'm Eric, and you're watching Eric's Crypto Corner. I'm a tax accountant with over 17 years' experience in the industry, and I've been in the crypto space for about 5 years, buying crypto, selling crypto, mining crypto, and doing a little AI GPU rentals on the side as well. So let's go ahead and get started with today's video. So a couple videos back, I did a video on somebody hitting a Bitcoin block at home, basically. They only had 140 terahash. It's actually not a ton of terahash in order to solve a Bitcoin block. So obviously they were very lucky. And I kind of gone over a Bitcoin node and how those things work using Umbrel. Well, today I've gotten so much feedback from that video that people are just saying, show me how to do the Umbrel operating system setup and run my own node and all that stuff. So that's what today's going to be all about. Is we're going to go through three basically different parts of how that process works. We're going to download and get Umbrel onto like a USB stick here, get that ready to go. We're going to go ahead and install it as step two on a PC of your choice. And then we're going to go ahead and configure it. Okay, so let's get the first step rolling here. All right, so step one here is we need to go and download Umbrel operating system for basically PCs here onto a USB drive. And there's a couple different steps to get this done. The first thing we need to do is go over to the GitHub website, and you can go to the Umbrel. I can actually post a link in this on the video so you have it. But we're going to go ahead and install Umbrel on an x86 system, aka Windows, or sorry, not Windows, but on a normal PC setup here. And it's going to go through a couple different requirements that you need. Obviously, that you want to have a decent AMD or Intel processor. Now, I'm particularly running with a 5700G. That is more than sufficient to handle this. And the reason why I went with a G instead of an X, I have a lot of 5700X CPUs that I've used before. Number one, they're fairly cheap. They're $150 or $125 or whatever the deal is. And if you get the G version of it, you don't have to spend money on a graphics card. Okay, so you can run this thing without a graphics card if you get a CPU that already kind of has the graphics built into it. So that's kind of what I did just to save quite a bit of money on this setup because I'm building a dedicated rig. Basically it's going to say you need 4 gig of RAM. That's kind of a joke. I would definitely recommend at least, 16, just do 32 if you can. I'm doing 48 on mine, and the more RAM, the better. So if you're running a bunch of different, applications on your node, you can handle that. And obviously storage, it says you need 32 gig, but it does put in parentheses over here. Hey, if you're doing a Bitcoin node, you normally need 1 terabyte. And don't bother getting a 1 terabyte hard drive. Go ahead and get a 2 terabyte hard drive. Then this way, the node will take up a full terabyte or just about that amount. And as this blockchain continues to grow, you'd hate to have to redo this whole process and buy a 2 terabyte down the road anyway. So just for an extra like $20, $30, just get the 2 terabyte. Don't monkey around with the 1 terabyte. Okay, with that being said, let's go ahead and get looking at what else we need here. So, we talked about you're going to need a USB stick, 4 gig, or higher. That's how big, USB is going to be. We need to use the Balena Etcher installer, and we need to download the computer. So let's go ahead and get that party started. I'm going to go ahead and get this download started here. And while that's downloading, I'm going to go over and download the Balena Etcher program, and we can go ahead and download that. And I'm on Windows right now. If you're using something else is fine, but I'm going to go ahead and download this on Windows, and that'll get downloaded here. And Balena Etcher is basically just a program that allows you to, flash, operating systems onto USB drives easily. So it really is a pretty easy tool to use. So while these things are downloading, I'm going to click back a couple and get back to here. and we'll let these things download, and then we'll pick this back up in a second. Okay, now everything is done downloading. It took about 3 or 4 minutes on my end. Yours might take longer, or shorter, depending on your internet speed. But everything is now downloaded. So when you click on the Balena Etcher file that you downloaded, it'll basically just open right up. So this is what Balena Etcher should look like when you have it opened up. And really, you've got a couple different options here. We can flash from file, flash from URL, clone drive, yada, yada. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and put in my USB drive into my computer, the one that I want to install Umbrel on. And I'm going to go ahead and click flash from file. And what we're going to do is we're going to pick the file that you had downloaded. Now, you may not see my screen of where I downloaded the Umbrel, but I'm selecting the Umbrel OS USB installer. It's going to be a pretty big file, probably about 2 or 3 gig. And once you select the Umbrel OS installer, and it should end with that .iso file, you're going to go ahead and click on select target. So once you selected your file, it should move you along down the path here to selecting where you want to install it. Now, this is basically going to show you all your hard drives and everything else. Make sure, this is a very big important thing, that you pick the correct hard drive that you want to do here. So if you have a bunch of different hard drives on your computer, and you can see, I've got, a bunch of different hard drives. I've got, backup drive here. There's some other hard drives that are on my computer. Make sure that you do select the appropriate one. If you select the wrong drive here, you're going to overwrite whatever was on that drive. Now, this is very easy for me to see. It's a 16 gig thumb drive. I literally just put this thumb drive in. I made sure that that is the correct one. I made sure that my device location is correct. So I'm going to go ahead and select that. Okay. So what this is going to do is it's going to say we're going to install Umbrel on this device. Now you can change it or cancel it or whatever, but look down below and make sure your sizes are correct. And then once you're good, you literally just click on flash. Now you probably have to click like a yes, it's okay to doing it. You might get a little pop-up window, something like that. And right now it should begin the flashing process. Now you can see, it's got an ETA, 16 minutes, 14 minutes, whatever. This is probably going to bounce around a little bit based on your read-write speed of your computer and the USB drive that you're using. So I'm going to let this thing go and finish up. It's probably going to take a few minutes, and I'm going to pause the video here and resume when it's done installing that operating system or flashing it onto the USB stick. Okay, one thing I wanted to go over was just kind of the ending process here of Balena Etcher. And what happens here is Balena Etcher is going to write the file on your USB drive, and then it's going to go through basically a second pass. It validates it. And when it's done, you're going to see that it's been installed or flashed, and then it's also been validated. Okay, so that's it. You are officially done with Balena Etcher, so you can just close out of that. And we're going to go ahead and take our USB out of our computer. And we're going to head downstairs now and get this thing going on our PC. Okay, so I am down in the basement now, and I've got my computer set up that I had my node running on. This is a 5700G, 48 gig of RAM, and a 2 terabyte hard drive. I do have it connected to Ethernet. I don't recommend doing Wi-Fi. If you can do Ethernet, go ahead and do that. That's going to be the most or fastest ping for you. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my USB stick. Go ahead and pop it in, the computer here. If I can do it correctly. There we go. And we're just going to simply turn this guy on. Oh, hold on. I got to turn on the power here on the. Go. All right. So now with the USB stick in, And I think it's powered on. No, okay. So let's go ahead and power it on now. Now with the USB stick in, this should basically just write right to your hard drive. So let's see if anything pops up here on the monitor. Okay, so it took about maybe a minute or two for this to get rolling. The computer did, spin around a little while. So just kind of give it some time. And you're going to see that you get to this Umbrel installer here. Okay. So we have to pick which storage device we want to install Umbrel on. Obviously, we want to do the 2 terabyte hard drive that you have on your computer, not the 15 gig hard drive as in my situation, because that's the USB drive. So I'm going to go ahead and just push 1. Okay, you got to put on number lock. I suppose that would help. Hit enter, and it's going to install. So let's go ahead and give it some time to install here on your 2 terabyte hard drive or bigger. It's going to take a little while, so I'm going to pause this right now. Okay, so Umbrel has installed. Does say Umbrel OS has installed here. Press any key to shut down. Remember to remove the USB drive before turning the device back on. So I'm going to go ahead and hit a key. It's going to go ahead and turn off the computer, which we can now see is turned off. I'm going to do as instructed and remove the USB stick. And then we're going to go ahead and power this guy back on. And it should boot to the Umbrel OS. This is how hard it is to install it on a computer. One thing that I will say is that I did have a clean, hard drive on this device. If you have a drive that isn't clean, you may have to select, what drive you want to install it on. But now it's booting up here. And basically it's just going to tell you, hey, you can now access Umbrel at umbrel.local or your IP address there as well. There is nothing else that we have to do now. The node is officially up and running. Now that we've got Umbrel installed and we have a place to access it, let's go ahead and get going and configuring Umbrel. Okay, so now that Umbrel is installed on your computer, it is simply a matter of configuring it. And configuring it is just going to umbrel.local on your computer. And actually, I can drag this down a little bit. I think you can see it here that umbrel.local will bring you to umbrel.local/onboarding. All right, we're going to go ahead and click on start and then create your account. Ooh, what should we call it? You can call this whatever you want. And I'm just going to go ahead and go Eric, and my password will just go password, or actually let's go something more fun, like Umbrel 2025 exclamation point. Try that. Okay, Umbrel 2025 exclamation point. Okay, let's go ahead and create. You're all set. Your Umbrel is now ready. So let's go ahead and click on next. Now, this brings you basically to your dashboard of your Umbrel. And the first thing that we're going to want to install is going to be your Bitcoin node. This is going to be the one thing that we definitely need to have. However, a Bitcoin node, we don't want this one right here. We want to find the NOTS node. That is the recommended one that I will do. Let's go ahead and see if we can find NOTS here somewhere. There should be a search up here as well. Yep, NOTS. Okay, Bitcoin NOTS, here we go. If you want to do some research as to why I recommend installing Bitcoin NOTS over Bitcoin Core, feel free to do that, or maybe someday I'll bring up a video, but I feel like a lot of people have already talked about this enough that I think it's been beaten to death. So go ahead and install Bitcoin Knots. It doesn't take all that long to install the actual program itself. And we're going to sit here and wait. But once this is done installing, we are going to have to download the entire blockchain. Now, depending on your internet speed, CPU speed, these types of things, this could take, a little while. In fact, it normally takes me, whenever I do a node install and download the entire blockchain, it normally takes about 1 to 2 days to download this thing. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and let this thing finish installing here. And you can always come back and get out of this thing if you want. And you can see the status of it here. It's still at 99%. Oh, and one thing while we're waiting for Bitcoin Knots to install, kind of take a little tour around Umbrel OS. You can see that you can use it for downloads, videos, documents. This is, an entire operating system. So if you want to use this as like a file storage deal, you definitely can. One of the cool things that you can see is, like on Windows, you can see your usage. And so when you click on, your live usage, you can see your CPU, your memory being used, your storage, how much is left, so on and so forth. So it's kind of cool. It does give you that. And just to kind of come down here at the bottom, we have the home button. There's going to be an app store button, which you can search for different apps if you want to install apps. This is kind of going to be just another shortcut to that usage statistics down here. What is this? I think this is just your files. Yep. And I think we've also got some settings. I haven't really monkeyed around with any of these different types of settings. If you want to connect your Wi-Fi, you can. You want to do 2FA. You can remote in for access, all this kind of stuff. You can shut it down from these settings. You can restart. You can log out. Whatever you want to do, you can definitely do that here. Okay, that's just kind of the settings. And then I think we've also got, oops, that's the settings already. I forgot what this last one was. Some widgets. Okay, well, whoop-de-doo. All right, so we're going to go ahead and let Bitcoin Knots finish installing here. And then we'll come back and I'll show you how to download the blockchain in a minute. Okay, so you can see that Bitcoin Knots has completely installed now. The little line across it is now done. And you can actually click on it. And you can see that it's starting to synchronize. And like we talked about just a few seconds ago, this is going to take a long time to download the entire blockchain. So what this is doing is, remember, Bitcoin finds a block or has a block solved every 10 minutes. Well, this network has been online since 2008. I think it was January 2008 or something like that. So you've got about 17 years worth of data that's got to be downloaded here. Now, up on the top right corner inside of your Knots node, you're going to see how many connections you have. 10 is the most connections you'll ever get. And what this is doing is connecting to other nodes around the world, and it's going to download one block at a time. So as you can see here, this block is just constantly moving, and downloading. Okay, so, we're going to let this run now for a while. Up here it says it's been running 17 minutes. The other thing I wanted to come back to is when you're installing your Knots node, you're going to notice that your storage, when it's done all the way across, now, I think it took probably 15, maybe even 20 minutes for Knots to install. Actually, that was the longest thing I've had to wait for so far today on the install process is Knots. But you're going to notice that your storage is starting to creep up there now that Knots is was fully installed, and now it's starting to download the entire blockchain. Now, while you're downloading the blockchain, there's a couple other programs, that we can go ahead and install. And so let's go ahead and do that. I want to go ahead and go over to, yes, we're going to want to do Mempool. So Mempool is your own little copy of the blockchain, and you're going to see, when you try to install Mempool, this is like a visual product that you can see each block and who found what block and when. And we kind of went through this in the Bitcoin video a couple videos ago. So it's going to say, okay, well, you've got a dependency here. We've got to install the Electrum server. We've got knots installed, but we do have to install this. So let's go ahead and install this first. This is a Electrum server here. Let's just go ahead and install that. Now this one shouldn't take very long to install. And we're just waiting for it there. Okay, that should pretty much do it there. That's done. Okay, so now we've got the Electrum install. Let's go ahead and go back to Mempool. Let's go ahead and install that. Now that dependency should be resolved and we can install Mempool. This also should not take, a ton of time to install here. So we'll just kind of do this on the video. Okay, well, I'm not going to wait. Well, okay, now it really fired up here at the end. All right, so I was going to be like, well, you're not going to want to listen to dead silence here for any significant amount of time. All right, so that's done. Now, the last thing that I typically will install is the public pool. So this is this is your own mining pool software. So you can mine your Bitcoin miner, your ASIC miner to your own node. So we're going to go ahead and install that, and that needs knots installed. So we're going to go ahead and do that. And really, these are the softwares that I have installed on my node. So you absolutely have to have Bitcoin knots running. You have to have a copy of the entire blockchain running. You have to have Mempool. Well, actually, you don't have to have Mempool. I just like that so I can see who found what block on my own copy of the blockchain. Electrum servers requirement, and public pool is where you mine to. Okay, so I'm gonna pop back over to Bitcoin node, and you can see we're at a whopping 4.22%. So unfortunately, I'm gonna have to let this run for a little while here, probably a day, maybe day and a half, and we'll pick this back up when it's done. All right, so we got pretty lucky here. It took less than 20 hours. You can see that the node has been running for 20 hours now. It is at 100% for the synchronized rate here. So the node is done. It is finished. It is completely updated. And I'm just for your reference, I do have 1,000 megabyte per second up and down fiber. So I have a little faster internet than most people do, but it took significantly less time to download this than I originally thought. So maybe that's because I did upgrade my internet last time I ran my node install here. I'm not quite sure, but I checked this a couple hours ago after I got up. It's about 8 o'clock this morning here in Wisconsin, and I checked this a couple hours ago, and it was already at 100%. So, you may, be able to download this thing in less than a day if you've got some pretty good internet. So you can see our node is 100% running, and you can see that our storage now is at a full 951 gigs. So you can see having the 1 terabyte hard drive, not really a great idea. If you're planning on running a Bitcoin node, you really just don't have very much room to install really anything. And as the Bitcoin blockchain grows, you're going to have to get a 2 terabyte hard drive anyway. Okay, so our node is done. Everything is ready to go. The last bit that I did want to show in this video was how to set up your miner to point to your node. So let's go ahead and open up public pool. Okay, and here is your, oh, that's funny. I already have 2 miners running to it. So that's funny because that was my original address. But what you see here is this is your pool address. So it's that stratum plus TCPs : //umbrel.local. Now, one thing that I will note is that when you set up your Bitcoin miner to point to your own pool, and let me see if I can bring one up here. I think it's this. Yeah, so here I just have my little lucky miner right here. And This one currently, since I had to set up the node yesterday, I had my miners point to CK pool while I was downloading the node. And there's a couple different things that I wanted to show you. Here's one of my other miners. This is the Avalon Nano 3. And one thing I want you to be aware of is when you look at the public pool address here, it says you got to point to umbrel.local port 2018. Well, that's okay if you are doing a lucky miner is going to read that okay, and a BitAxe will read that address okay. But one thing I did notice is that with these nanos, these Avalon devices, you actually have to use the IP address plus your port. So when you come over to your configuration, each miner has a little different setup. So these nanos, any Avalon device, you're going to have to put in the whole thing, the Stratum plus TCP, blah, blah, blah. And then you're going to use the port and the IP address and then your wallet address. And with the Lucky Miner, you can actually I know I just have the IP in here, but with the Lucky Miner, you could just use this umbrel.local. And you can notice that on the Lucky Miner, it's kind of broken out. So they just want the address, the URL, and then they have a separate area for the port, and then they have a separate area for your wallet. And if you want to use my wallet address, feel free to mine any Bitcoin to that address anytime you see the need to test stuff out. I'm just joking. You probably don't want to use my address. You can use your own. So that is really it. And now that we're at our own node here, I can just copy my address here, this right here. And actually, while we're doing this, I'm just going to switch this around anyway. So I can just kind of do this and oops. And I'm going to move that up there, and we're going to switch the ports around here because CK Pool uses a different port than that, but the address and everything else is the same. I'm going to go ahead and click save, and I'm going to go ahead and click restart. And this process is pretty much the same process. When you change your pools, you are going to have to restart your ASIC machine. So it does require that restart, and you can see that we've already got this thing running here. This is that little Lucky Miner. I do have a video on how to set up a Lucky Miner. It's probably my least favorite miner to purchase, but it is the cheapest. I think it was like $100 brand new. So this is a very, very inexpensive miner to tinker around with. So as we let that kind of fire up, I am going to grab our address down here, zoop, and then I just want to show you public pools. Okay, so let's come over to here, and then you can just put in your address right here, and you can click on My Workers, and it's going to show you all the workers that you have going on. What's kind of cool about this is I've got a Nano 3 and a Nano 3S. The Nano 3 is at 2 terahash on average, and a Nano 3S is at 3 terahash on average. You can see when it was last seen, when it last submitted a share. You can see your session best difficulty. And the session best difficulty is basically what the highest share is that you've submitted, in order to solve a Bitcoin block while your miner's been up or while the pool's been up. All right. So the pool's only been up for a little while. And actually looking at this, you can see this fired up at about 12 a.m. So actually, mathematically wise, this thing only took about 12 hours to download the entire blockchain. So that's pretty cool. And then you can see that the 3 came online at about 2 a.m., probably because that one's not quite as smart to switch pools. And you can see up here the network difficulty is 1.55, 9 trillion. Well, we're in the millions. And you got to get to billions before you get to trillions, right? So my highest share ever was like 220 billion. So that's still a long way off from this. And that was from my 3S. So just so you know, I'm not even remotely close to hitting a Bitcoin block with my setup, but it's still fun to take a look at. And if you want to get back to the public pool homepage, just click on public pool, and it brings you back to this. And oh, you can see that our lucky miner is now registering here. And here it is. Now it's just added itself. It's just starting to fire up. Any miner that you switch to your pool or any other pool normally takes a few minutes to start going. And you can see, obviously, it's not even hitting, oops, it's not even hitting any significant difficulty yet. So anyways, that is how public pool works and how you set up your Bitcoin miner to point to your own node. You are now completely set up. All right, so from start to finish today, I know it's kind of a longer video, but we downloaded Umbrel, we installed Umbrel on our computer, and we also configured it. Now, the crappy part is you got to sit and wait, a day, 2, 3, maybe even longer, depending on your internet connection and your node setup, to get that entire blockchain downloaded onto your node. I hope that seeing the video on how to configure your ASIC miner to point to your node was helpful as well for those of you who are mining to your own node. And if you have any questions about how your Umbrel install went, maybe you ran into a glitch, maybe I've run into that glitch before, feel free to post the comments down below and I'll see if I can be of any help to you. Okay? Well, thanks for stopping by today and putting up with this long how-to video on how to install your Umbrel node. I hope that you have yourself a great day. And as usual, this is for educational purposes only. It is not financial advice. So until next time, peace.